Have you ever wanted to play a main series Pokemon game that took place entirely in one city instead of being about exploring a whole region of diverse locales? No? Well, me neither, but that's exactly what we have here in Pokemon Legends ZA. Almost none of you would know this about me since I've made almost no content on it, but I am a lifelong Pokemon diehard. I've been into the series ever since the cards first came out and the anime started here in Australia. I never had a Game Boy to play the original games on, but ever since Generation 3, I have played every single mainline Pokemon game bar Generation 7, and I've also played around half of the spin-offs that have come out. Pokemon is actually my most played game series of all time. I've done things from completing the national decks in Gen 4, 5 and 9 games, to spending hundreds of hours shiny hunting and building competitive level teams. I truly love this series, but I'd be lying if I said that I've enjoyed it to the same degree in recent years. The Nintendo Switch generation has just not been my cup of tea at all, and I've been wondering a lot about whether the games just aren't as good or whether I'm the one that's changing. Well, that question has partially been answered for me, because as promised, Pokemon Legends ZA is a major shake-up to the regular Pokemon game formula. The one entry I did really love on the Nintendo Switch was Pokemon Legends Arceus, so when Legends ZA was revealed, I had a horrible mix of both excitement and worry in my bones. You see, this isn't exactly the follow-up to that game that I was after. Pokemon Legends ZA was tasked with taking the Pokemon series in a bold new direction, and it has done exactly that, but I can't say that all of the changes have stuck the landing. This game takes place entirely in Lumio City, the main city of the Kalos region, which was the setting for Pokemon X and Y. Back on the 3DS, Game Freak wanted to make Lumio City feel like a really grand location with a ton of things to do in it, but as everyone knows, that vision came up a little short in the end product. So it seems they saw fit to dedicate an entire project to making up for those shortcomings. Just for clarification, this game is released on both the Nintendo Switch 1 and 2, but this review will only be focusing on the Nintendo Switch 2 version, since I don't exactly have the time to play both versions, and I think I'd rather swallow a jar of marbles than play another poorly optimized and badly performing game on the first Switch. I feel like at this point in the series' lifespan, I don't really need to explain what a Pokemon game is, so instead, I'm just going to explain what this game does differently. Let's start with the story and narrative. Pokemon Legends ZA isn't just set in the same place that is in X and Y, you could consider it a direct sequel to those games, since our story here takes place 5 years after the events of said games, and serves as a way to expand and conclude storylines that were in those entries. Lumiose has changed quite a bit over the last 5 years in two main ways. In an effort to create a city where both people and Pokemon can coexist, there are now sectioned off areas of the city known as Wild Zones, where Pokemon freely roam, and a new nighttime competitive circuit called the ZA Royale has popped up, where trainers duke it out to gain points and try and climb the ranks all the way from Rank Z to Rank A. Mega Evolution was something that was introduced in Pokemon X and Y, where certain Pokemon can go beyond their regular forms and temporarily evolve further, due to their connection with their trainer, and with this game being a sequel to those games, it makes perfect sense that Mega Evolution has returned for the first time since the 3DS era. The only thing is though, something is going wrong with some of the wild Pokemon in Lumiose, and it's up to you and your team to help these rogue Mega Evolutions and make sure neither civilians or Pokemon are hurt. We have ourselves quite a large cast of characters here, made up of mostly new friends and enemies, but also a couple of guest appearances from some people you might recognise from X and Y, and I have to be honest about it, this might just be the most solid cast we've seen in a Pokemon game ever. I'm not going to sit here and act like this game is full of amazing writing. It isn't, and not by a long shot, but the game actually does a decent job of building up connections not just between you and these characters, but between each other, that by the end of the game you actually feel kind of positive about the cast, whereas with most Pokemon games you just kind of feel absolutely nothing about the supporting cast. That was something I felt like was really lacking in the previous few entries. Pokemon Legends Arceus had cool designs, but everyone felt robotic and had no connection. In Scarlet and Violet, one of the character storylines was quite well written, and the others just had no depth to them at all. It feels like the writers were actually on the same page with this one, and I do like the feeling that having a good cast has when the game takes place entirely in one location. The story's pacing is probably the one big negative that I have to declare when talking about anything story related in this game. The beginning quarter and final quarter of the game do a good job of keeping the narrative going and keeping the player hooked, but the middle of the game is unfortunately painfully dull, as you're just repeating the same 3 kinds of activities with not a whole lot of story beats occurring. When the story does take you away from these activities for an hour or so, it feels like the most interesting thing in the world in comparison, and I found that in the middle of the game, I had a really hard time being able to sit for long periods to play because I just wasn't very interested in what was happening. If the story was paced better, had less repetition, and focused on giving the player more unique things to do, then I would have enjoyed the journey just that little bit more. If you were a fan of Pokemon X and Y and wanted some answers to plot threads from those games, or just wanted to see more of some of the characters from that game, then you'll probably really enjoy the story here. And if not, then it's still interesting to see a section of a previous game several years down the track. It's not unheard of in Pokemon. The Johto games took you to Kanto 2 years after the original games, and Black 2 and White 2 were sequels to Black and White, but I do enjoy every time Pokemon does this, and I'm really enjoying that the Legends games are taking established settings and stories and expanding on them, whether in the past or in the future. So Pokemon Legends ZA clearly differs a lot from your traditional mainline entries. Let's go over what makes this one different to play. Despite all the changes that this game brings to the table, you'll still be doing pretty much all of your regular Pokemon activities here, plus a few extras. There's plenty of places to go around and battle or catch wild Pokemon, so many trainers to battle, and even your other features such as character customization are still here and even more of a focus than ever. Some of the features that debuted in Legends Arceus have made a return as well, such as larger than normal alpha Pokemon existing in the wild to battle and catch, a greater focus on exploration than traditional titles, and you'll still be dodging plenty of Pokemon attacks yourself to stop yourself from blacking out. Gone is the crafting system from Legends Arceus. Your items work more like the regular games, where you have your standard consumables, held items you can give to your team for battle effects, and your traditional Pokemon centers are back. In this way, Legends ZA really succeeds in both feeling like a mainline title and a follow-up to Legends Arceus. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the biggest departure this game has made compared to any other, which is obviously the battle system. You know how it goes, right? You have up to 6 Pokemon on your team, each of them get 4 move slots, and they learn a wide variety of moves with all different types and effects that have different type combinations for more or less damage. Well, the good news is that all of that is still here alive and well. The one thing that isn't is that this game does not have turn-based combat. Gone are the days where one Pokemon gets a turn, then the other, then back to the last one until the battle is over. Here, we've gone full Final Fantasy VII Remake mode and shifted to a real-time action combat system that incorporates elements of the traditional battle system. Your battles take place in a 3D arena like they did in Legends Arceus, but all of the moves that a Pokemon can do now operate on a cooldown timer which varies depending on the move, and each move has different properties. For example, the move Fire Fang, your Pokemon will run right up to its opponent and hit as long as the move connects, then go on cooldown for a few seconds. Compare that to the move Flamethrower, where your Pokemon will stand back and prepare its attack, and any or all Pokemon that is standing in the area of the flame will get hurt by it, and the move has a longer cooldown. This system adds a whole new depth to what moves you want to put on your team, since it's no longer about whether your Pokemon is a physical or special attacker. You also have to factor in the situation of the battle, your own Pokemon's defenses, and which additional properties you want your moves to have. Almost all other moves have been retooled for this new battle system as well, and I've found that I was running movesets on my team that I would probably never run in the traditional games. 2 examples I have are that my Delphox had Fire Spin on for the entire game, I'd never use Fire Spin in a turn-based Pokemon game, but in this game, the damage over time is incredibly useful when going up against massive and slow alphas or rogue megas. My other example is that on my Scrafty I had the move Power Up Punch equipped, which doesn't do a lot of damage itself, but does give my Scrafty a momentary attack boost, so whichever move I use afterwards has more potency. One massive help with the change in battle system is that you can swap out your team's moves at any time for any battle from the main menu, so really take advantage of that and strategize depending on what your needs at the time are. You can freely swap out which Pokemon you have on the field at any time as well, but it carries a cost since your Pokemon has to do its entrance animation before it's ready to attack, so you're potentially leaving it open to be KO'd if done at the wrong time. While you do need to think differently and act differently in this new battle system, you might be surprised to hear that I actually found it less interesting on the whole than I find the turn-based combat. Once you've sort of worked out an optimum build for each of your team members that covers most scenarios, each battle becomes just using whatever move is available once it's off cooldown, and it ends up feeling less engaging as a result. Take my Scrafty for instance. Yeah, I had to formulate the strategy of Power Up Punch and then Brick Break, but once I've worked it out and go into battle, just using that over and over gets quite boring quite quickly. The moves work very much the same way that Clive's abilities do in Final Fantasy XVI, except you do less because you have no regular attacks, and people clowned on that game for being just use ability when off cooldown. This game kind of wants you to strategically place your Pokemon and utilize moves to avoid attacks, but the system is just a bit too slow and cumbersome to be able to effectively do that. The only way I can see that working is if you ended up controlling the Pokemon yourself, kind of like in Ni no Kuni. Beyond your standard wild Pokemon and trainer battles, there is a brand new type of battle here which I've alluded to several times now called the Rogue Mega Evolved Pokemon battles. These are wild Pokemon gone berserk due to a surge in Mega Energy, and it's your job to take them down and save them. These battles remind me a lot of the Dynamax dens from Sword and Shield and raid battles from Scarlet and Violet. You have your big rogue mega Pokemon in the arena, and you have to duke it out with them raid boss style, utilizing every strategy you've got. Their health pools are massive to make them feel more like boss fights, and not only do your Pokemon have to survive, but you have to make sure that you don't fail by having your trainer take too much damage. Some of the moves these Pokemon do and the strategies you need to avoid them are like something straight out of Final Fantasy XIV's Trials and Raids, and I think these would be a fun new addition if the health pools weren't quite so high that it felt like you're just spamming moves. But this is where your own Mega Evolution comes into play, since as a trainer, you have two ways to be able to get a leg up on your opponents. If you fully charge up your Mega Energy Bar and your Pokemon is holding a Mega Stone, you can Mega Evolve it to be able to do massive amounts of damage, and potentially change your typing and stats. But if you don't want to Mega Evolve, you can use this new feature called Plus Moves, where you power up a regular move with Mega Energy to still do more damage than normal. I really don't mind this feature, since it means that even if a Pokemon doesn't have a Mega Evolution, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have utility. Mega Evolution doesn't just apply when you're in these rogue Mega battles, you can use this feature in any battle as long as your bar is charged, so go for your life. Speaking of Mega Evolutions, almost all of the Pokemon which had them in Generation 6 have returned, and a whole lot of Pokemon such as Dragonite, Scrafty and Victory Bell have received their own Megas. One big plus I have to say for the game is that its Pokédex is actually really fun. It's got a great mix of both old and new mons, and a lot of the new Mega forms went to very deserving Pokemon. The one thing that always disappointed me with Legends Arceus a little was its Pokédex. That game just having the Sinnoh Dex was fine considering what the game was, but it felt a little boring just a few months after Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I'm glad to say that they hit straight gold with the Pokédex here, even if it's a modest 230 Pokemon so far. During your time in Lumio City, you'll mainly do one of four things. You have your main story missions, which are exactly what you're expecting. Side missions return from Legends Arceus, and I'd say they're a little weaker on average this time around, with around half of them being tutorials, and the other half being Yakuza-styled hijinks that I actually kind of enjoyed. Other than that, you'll be in the wild zones battling and capturing Pokemon in the same way you did in Legends Arceus, where you have to actively throw the Pokeballs at the Pokemon. And the last activity is competing in the ZA Royale that I mentioned earlier. I've now done all of the main story and post-game story, almost all side missions, and am only missing around 10 Pokemon for my Pokedex, and after spending around 45 hours to do all of that, I do have to say that I don't particularly feel any drive to play any more at all, aside from getting those last few side missions done and get those last few Pokemon. There is a decent amount of content overall, but I can't say that I feel like the post-game offers up a lot for you to continue on with. Online battles do exist, and you do need to do them to unlock certain Mega Evolution Stones, but I'll be honest, I have absolutely no drive to play this system against other people online. The classic battle system? Yeah, I love building competitive teams and watching VGC content, but this system just does not engage my brain in the same sort of way. It doesn't feel quite cerebral enough for me, so I'm just not going to do that. That's pretty much all there is for the gameplay mechanics, but I still have some thoughts about the design aspects of the game. Pokemon Legends ZA is a bit of an interesting one when you start looking at it from a design perspective. Like I said at the start of the review, it's very admirable that Game Freak wanted to really expand on the concept of Lumio City and give it all of this attention, but I feel quite torn on this decision. Did they do a good job at turning it into a large city with plenty of things to see and do? Yes, absolutely they did. The map is quite large for what it is, and there's plenty to check out. Is the game world fun and interesting as a result? Fun, yeah, but not very interesting, no. I'm no stranger to Pokemon games that take place entirely in one city. I'm like the biggest Detective Pikachu defender, but even the two Detective Pikachu games had more variety in locales and things to look at than this game does. Lumiose is truly a full city, with shopping avenues and main roads and everything, but almost every part of the city just looks like a city. I only sort of realised about 25 hours in that it was an open world style game and you're supposed to take time exploring it, because with every street and section looking the same, I was just going from objective to objective and not actually bothering to take it in. This might be a me problem. I don't really explore Melbourne and I've lived here for years because city street after city street just doesn't interest me. But then you look at the wild zones in the game and they don't have much variety either. Yeah, you do have some random ice zone, and a bunch of them have trees and nature, but they're basically all just slightly natural suburban areas that look identical aside from what Pokemon are in them and what layout they have. There's no sense of personality in the different sections of Lumiose, which is fine for a city, it just doesn't make for a very interesting game setting. Lumiose doesn't just have an explorable ground level, this game has a bit of verticality to it since pretty much the entire game has explorable rooftops. You'll find plenty of Pokemon, trainers and items up here, but it falls into the same problems where after you've explored for an hour or so, every rooftop looks the same. There are a couple of times in the main story where you'll briefly go to locations that are very different from the main one, and every time I did go to these, it was the most interested I was in the game. When it comes to the visual design of the game, I know that it's ended up being a bit of a contentious topic online, but honestly, I think the game looks perfectly fine on a visual level. I said that I'm only reviewing the Switch 2 version of the game at the start of the video, and I can definitely say that this game looks perfectly fine on the Switch 2. No, it doesn't have super realistic graphics. Yes, Digimon does have a higher fidelity art style overall, but Pokemon games have their defined aesthetic to them now, which you either like or you don't. If you don't like the game's art style, that is perfectly fine. I neither like it nor dislike it, but the point is that they executed it well here. The game is clear, crisp, and the resolution and frame rate are perfectly fine in both handheld and docked modes, and I ran into pretty much no bugs in my entire playthrough, which I think makes this the first time since Black 2 and White 2 that I have not been let down by a Pokemon game's technical performance. It's so clear that these games just need more power due to subpar optimization. I'd love to see Legends Arceus get a performance boost and resolution boost on the Switch 2 like how Scarlet and Violet did. Personally, I'd be fine if Pokemon games continued on with this art style for the Switch 2 generation. I just want to see a bigger variety of interesting locations to be able to explore. The soundtrack and sound design both are also perfectly fine here. A lot of the sound effects are carried across but slightly altered from Legends Arceus, which is a fun twist, and the soundtrack is totally inoffensive and feels like something straight out of the 3DS era of Pokemon. This is a massive step up from Scarlet and Violet, which have one of my least favourite gaming OSTs of all time. It really feels like the people behind these Legends games have a vision for what they want the game to be, and they're just focusing on executing that vision, and I can confirm at this point that the Legends titles are overtaking the traditional modern entries in terms of quality in design. So all in all, I think I can say that I do like Pokemon Legends ZA. I did enjoy my time with it, I just didn't love it like I did with Legends Arceus. I really do respect that this is a bit of a step in a different direction, and I love that we're getting games that aren't just playing it safe, but there's still a little bit to work on. As positives, we have a legitimately fun cast of characters, a decent story continuing on from one that people wanted to follow up on, a brand new battle system that requires brand new strategies and plays totally differently, a great Pokédex to collect, a good amount of side content, tons of character customization, great technical performance, and a decent OST. On the flip side, as negatives, we have bad story pacing, lack of variety in areas, combat gets stale sometimes, and a lack of meaningful post-game to continue on with. As a result, I'll be giving Pokemon Legends ZA a score of 8 out of 10. This score is specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2 version. I'm so surprised about how this game was smooth as butter on the console, honestly, and I've got to give it props. Please stop putting streamers in your plots though, it's cringe as hell and no one likes it. I know a lot of people are mad about the DLC coming soon for this game, but honestly, I'm keen for more content, more Pokemon to catch and collect, more Megas to have including my boy Raichu, and hopefully a little more story with some of the cast. That's going to be about it from me guys. If you enjoyed the review, give it a like or sub to the channel, I'd really appreciate it. See ya!